This is the Brand Doctor podcast, where we positively uplift possibilities for personal and business brands, and we give you straight talk you can trust. You probably need clarity for your brand. You might even feel stuck at the starting gate to the next level of your brand. Welcome to bring your vision and your challenges right here to the Brand Doctor podcast. Today, we're uplifting the brand journey of Andrew Crawford. Andrew is the visionary founder of the brand Compliance Specialists, protecting you to grow. Andrew serves as an invaluable resource, and he counsels the smallest U.S. companies about all of their vulnerabilities, responsibilities, and preventabilities in the area of data security and privacy laws and internet-based crimes of data breaches and personal identity theft and intellectual property and ransomware extortion. And you might be saying, oh, fringe group. Look, SonicWall reported 623 million ransomware attacks in 2021. It's not a fringe group. Okay, this is not fringe. This is happening to everybody. Point is, even the smallest U.S. businesses are vulnerable, but they don't know that. I've read Andrew's story of how he envisioned in 2015 the coming convergence of trends, which result in small business owners and all the people whose livelihoods depend on them being destroyed by increasingly frequent business killing events. Andrew Crawford, I know that many of our listeners' businesses and their lives, for that matter, will benefit by what they hear today on this show. So welcome, friend. How are you?
I'm really good. Thank you.
It's great to have you here. Andrew, how different is your brand now compared to when you first envisioned the convergence?
When it first started, I was an IT, what's called a managed service provider.
Yeah.
But as I began realizing what was happening, I began digging into the side of what's known as compliance, the data security, and there's laws behind it. And it's transformed my business because I realized there's no size limitation to the laws. The smallest U.S. businesses still have to obey the same laws.
You've shared with me there are some heavyweight laws that came out of Europe. There are federal laws, there are regulations in industries, and certain states of the United States have passed their own laws. So if you do business with their residents, even if you're from another state, you have to obey their laws. So there is a increasing network
Oversight.
of laws
Yeah.
that even the smallest U.S. businesses need to obey. How in the world do they know that?
A lot of them don't.
Okay.
That's part of the problem.
Wow. So you told me before we started that your brand kind of went from old homemade to professional design. When somebody says your brand looks old, what does that mean, and why should you care?
Well, particularly in the IT space, if you look old, you're outdated. You must be behind. You don't know the latest or what's going on. So the image of the brand has to look fresh, alive, and current. Otherwise, I go find somebody else.
Yeah, and those laws you're talking about change all the time. So your look might say you're out of touch, you're out of date. So what was your biggest concern about branding, and did that evolve?
I had people who couldn't remember the name of my business.
Yikes.
So that was really a problem. So that told me that my brand was not reaching them at all. And it wasn't doing what I've learned a brand has to do, which is say what it does and does what it says.
Ooh. Hey, you want a job? Thank you. So what lessons have you learned about branding en route, if you will, to what you do now, which is teaching lessons about what it takes to ensure what you call true small business data security?
Consistent language is a big thing. If I say things 16 different ways, the message doesn't get across. It's confusing. And so it's very important to be aware of specific things and say them consistently.
Those are powerful words. And it's absolutely true. Having been defining and languaging brands for 45, going on 46 years, it is hugely true. And it doesn't matter what industry you're in. I'm going to piggyback on that, Andrew, and agree with me, if you will, that most people don't understand. And this, for every listener here, this is a rich strategy nugget. A brand is a perception. And you can write that down. Write down one more thing. It's not your perception. Okay. You can think what your brand is. Doesn't matter. What matters is your target audience's perception of your brand. So write this down too. How I see our brand is one thing. Ask others how they see our brand, your brand. There are always gaps. Andrew mentioned, and I said I would piggyback, Andrew mentioned the words misperception or confusion. Because of inconsistent language, brands create confusion or misperception. Look, I've been married for 45 years, and still in my house, that moment happens. Well, I thought you said, yeah, okay. Even if you're not married, I know you get that. Okay.
Yeah.
So excellent, consistent communication is necessary to close those gaps. So there are no gaps. You want your target audience to have the perception, a consistent perception that you shape for them, that moves the brand forward to where it's going. Andrew, how has overcoming that number one barrier of yours been a challenge to the acceptance of this awesome, I believe, business protecting, livelihood saving service that your brand provides? How has overcoming this number one barrier, and you might want to mention what it is, been a challenge?
Well, the number one challenge has been convincing the small business owner that they're vulnerable.
Because they don't know.
They don't know. It just doesn't occur to them. And when it happens, it's too late. We've got to be putting protection in place before it happens, not after. And getting them to get their head around that whole concept is the biggest challenge.
I was looking at your website. There is some real clarity in some of the messages that are there, like right up front, like homepage above the fold kind of things. There's this little road sign thing that pops up and it says, your small business is in danger, like it's a road sign. So in caps, in danger. You won't see the attack, but we will. That's a message that will land, pardon the bonehead explain, when it lands. People don't see it until they see it. People don't get it until they get it. But it looks like you're putting those clear messages out there over and over. You told me that right before COVID, your message that preceded that, your small business is in danger, was if you're open for business, you're open for a business killing event. That is brilliant. But then COVID happened and nobody was open. So you told me you couldn't use that, right? Was that the story? That's a crazy good story. And you had to change it to your small business is in danger. You won't see the attack, but we will. But you've begun that process of consistent messaging to overcome that barrier. Because if you don't overcome it, they lose, you lose, and the country loses a lot of small businesses by lawsuits because they didn't spend the time or the small investment to make sure they were on the road to compliance, and they got sued for negligence. And
Yeah.
now they've lost their house, they've lost their business. Everybody that works for them depends on their livelihood is now no livelihood. So Andrew, I really believe in what you're doing. I think this is awesome. So take this, that strategy nugget, clarity and messaging to overcome barrier. Write this action item down. What target audiences think? Write down what your target audience, and you can take them one at a time. This target audience, that guy, if they're different. What does your target audience think repeatedly? It's in their mind, in their own language, in their own voice. I don't have time for this. I'll never understand this. I can't get this done. Somebody else is going to have to, whatever's in there, relevant to what your brand does. What are we'll call them care abouts, because it's things they care about because they're thinking about all the time that are relevant to what your brand does. Write them down. If you talk to them, you've heard them. If you haven't, you can consider, you probably know well enough to think what they might be. Write them down. And then make sure the top 3 on the list are the ones you think are the most frequent. Now use those care abouts to attract them. They'll recognize themselves and things will happen faster. Hopefully that's helpful. Andrew, you've been a gem. I really appreciate you coming on with us. In this episode of The Brand Doctor, we've lifted up the brand journey of Andrew Crawford. He's the visionary founder of the brand compliance specialist, protecting you to grow. He serves as an invaluable resource and counsels the smallest U.S. companies, ensuring they are in compliance with these ever-encroaching, ever-growing data security and privacy laws and regulations. You gained insight into how branding is shaping others' perception with consistent messages moving the brand forward. And you gained some insight into building clarity into messages that overcome the barrier and using care abouts, the thoughts of your target audiences, to attract them effectively. You'll get contact info for our guest today in the show notes, so you can take advantage of all of Andrew's brand has to offer, and even more information is available just by emailing us directly to our email address, rich@richbrands.org. The Brand Doctor podcast is dedicated to bring you strategies and actions to take your brand to the next level. So from our heart to yours, we encourage you to subscribe to the Brand Doctor podcast and check out other episodes for strategy nuggets and action items you can take right now. I'll speak with you again on our next episode. Remember, now is the time to define the brand you will become. We'll see you.